Red Hollow was not the kind of town that noticed small things. It noticed gunfire. It noticed drunken brawls spilling out of the saloon. It noticed cattle drives and dust storms, and men with reputations riding in from the horizon. But it did not notice the quiet seamstress at the corner of Main and Willow. Nancy Whitmore preferred it that way. Her shop sat between the barber and the general store, its wooden sign faded by years of sun. Inside, the air always smelled of clean cotton, starch, and lavender oil. Bolts of fabric lined the walls, calico wool, satin brought in by rail months before. A single window faced the street, where sunlight spilled across her cutting table. Nancy's hands were her livelihood. Slender, steady, precise. She could mend a ripped sleeve so neatly no one would find the tear again. She could hem a dress by sight alone. She believed everything broken could be repaired. One only had patience. That belief had carried her through more than fabric. The bell above her door jingled as Mrs. Harper bustled in with a torn apron. Fence caught it again. The woman huffed. Nancy smiled softly. Barbed wire doesn't know when to let go. She took the apron, examining the jagged rip. Clean tear. Easy fix. Outside, a commotion rose, hooves striking dirt, men's voices lifting in excitement. Nancy barely glanced toward the window. Travelers passed through often, but the noise grew louder. Curiosity tugged at her. She set down the apron and peered outside. A small crowd had gathered near the saloon. At its center stood a tall man dismounting a dark bay horse. He moved with controlled ease, like someone who measured every step. A long leather rifle case was slung over his shoulder. He removed his hat, revealing dark hair and a face cut sharp by sun and wind. There was something distant in his gray eyes, like a man who had seen too much open road. Someone in the crowd called out, "You, the sharpshooter." The man gave a slight nod. "Name's Marcus Hale," he said evenly. The name rippled through the onlookers. Nancy felt something tighten in her chest. She'd heard of traveling marksman men who made a living splitting cards and shooting coins out of the sky. Dangerous men, lonely men. Marcus's gaze drifted over the street and stopped at her window. For one suspended second, their eyes met. Nancy stepped back quickly, heat rushing to her cheeks. Foolish, she scolded herself. He was just another passing spectacle. She returned to her stitching. An hour later, the bell above her door chimed again. Nancy looked up, and her breath caught. Marcus stood in the doorway. Without the distance of the street between them, he seemed larger, not just in height, but in presence. The air shifted around him, as if he carried the wide prairie indoors. "Afternoon," he said, voice low and steady. Nancy forced her composure. "Good afternoon. What can I do for you?" He stepped forward and laid a long, dark coat across her counter. The sleeve was torn near the shoulder. Fabric sliced clean. "Need this repaired," he said. "Caught it on something." Her fingers brushed the edge of the tear. It wasn't caught on something. It had been grazed by a bullet. She didn't comment. "I can have it ready tomorrow," she said calmly. His gaze lingered on her hands as she pinned the fabric. "You're not afraid," he observed, "of mending a coat of me." Nancy met his eyes, steady as her needle. "Should I be?" A faint smile ghosted across his mouth. "Most people are. I fix what's damaged," she replied softly. "That's all." Something unreadable flickered in his expression, surprise, perhaps, or relief. He nodded. "Once. Tomorrow, then." As he turned to leave, she found herself speaking before she could stop. "Did you come for the exhibition?" He paused at the door. Among other things, the bell jingled as he stepped back into the sunlight. Nancy stood still for a long moment, staring at the torn sleeve beneath her fingers. She had spent her life sewing together frayed edges and worn seams. But this tear felt different. It wasn't just fabric. It was a glimpse into a life stitched together by danger, by near misses, and perfect aim. And for the first time, Nancy wondered what it would feel like to mend something that carried a heartbeat beneath it. Outside, laughter rose as men challenged Marcus to prove his skill. Inside, Nancy threaded her needle carefully. She had the strange feeling that her quiet life had just shifted, like fabric pulled taut before the first stitch is made. And somewhere deep within her steady hands, something trembled. By sunset, all of Red Hollow buzzed with one name: Marcus Hale. Nancy tried to keep her focus on the torn sleeve spread across her work table, but the noise outside made it nearly impossible. Laughter erupted in waves. Coins clinked. Boots stomped against packed dirt. Word had spread fast. The sharpshooter would put on a demonstration at dusk. She stitched carefully, aligning the fibers of the coat as though nothing in the world mattered more than symmetry. The tear had indeed been caused by a bullet close enough to scorch the fabric, but not pierce flesh. A narrow miss. A man who lived by aim could not afford many of those. When the church bell struck 7, Nancy tied off her thread and set the coat aside. She told herself she only wanted to see the quality of his skill, nothing more. The exhibition was held just beyond town, near an old fence line where bottles and tin plates had been propped along posts. Lanterns glowed against the falling twilight. The sky stretched wide and violet, the first stars beginning to shimmer. Nancy stayed at the back of the crowd. Marcus stood at the center. He had removed his coat, revealing a dark vest and crisp white shirt rolled at the sleeves. His movements were unhurried, economical. He loaded his rifle with practiced ease, never wasting motion. A rancher shouted, "Show us what you've got." Marcus lifted the rifle. The crack split the air. A bottle shattered instantly, glass scattering like fallen stars. The crowd roared. Nancy didn't flinch at the sound, but she felt it inside her chest, sharp and precise. He fired again. Another bottle burst. Then a tin plate spun wildly as his bullet struck dead center. "Blindfold him," someone yelled. Laughter rippled through the crowd, but Marcus only nodded. A strip of dark cloth was tied over his eyes. Silence settled, thick as dust. A boy tossed a coin high into the air. The rifle fired. The coin clanged against the fence post, split clean in two before it ever touched ground. Gasps replaced laughter. Nancy felt her breath leave her in a slow exhale. He truly never missed. But as the applause thundered, she noticed something no one else seemed to see. His jaw tightened slightly after each shot. His shoulders never relaxed. Precision wasn't pride, it was survival. When the demonstration ended, men crowded around him, clapping his back and offering drinks. Marcus accepted their praise with polite distance. Then his gaze drifted across the lantern-lit field. Dan found Nancy. Even in the crowd, he saw her. He excused himself and walked toward her. "You came," he said. "I wanted to see for myself," she replied. She hesitated. "You're very good." A corner of his mouth lifted. "That's one way to put it." "You don't miss," she added. "Not if I can help it." There was something in the way he said it that carried weight beyond exhibition tricks. They began walking back toward town as the crowd slowly dispersed. "How long have you been shooting?" Nancy asked. "Since I was 15. That's young." "So was I." The answer carried no bitterness, just fact. "And you?" he asked. "How long have you been sewing?" "My whole life." "Seems quieter than my trade." "It is," she admitted. "Thread doesn't echo across a valley." He chuckled softly at that. They walked in companionable silence for several steps. The wooden storefronts came into view, lanterns glowing warmly. "Do you ever wish for something different?" he asked suddenly. Nancy considered the question carefully. "I used to," she said. "When I was younger, I thought I'd travel, see cities, maybe even the ocean." She gave a small smile. "But my mother fell ill. The shop needed someone steady. And you stayed." "Yes." "Do you regret it?" She glanced at him. "Do you regret leaving?" The question lingered between them. Marcus looked toward the horizon, now swallowed by night. "Sometimes," he admitted, "but the road was all I knew." They reached her shop. "I finished your coat," she said softly. "You can pick it up in the morning. It'll be there." He paused, as though wanting to say more, but instead he tipped his hat. "Good night, Nancy." "Good night, Marcus." As he walked away, Nancy felt a strange awareness settle over her. He was not simply a man passing through. He was a storm held carefully, in human form, controlled, disciplined, dangerous. And yet, when he had spoken of regret, she'd seen something vulnerable beneath the steel. Inside her shop, she lit a lamp and placed his mended coat neatly over the counter. Her stitches were invisible now. Perfect. But she couldn't help wondering. A man built on flawless aim ever longed to miss on purpose, or if someone like her could ever fit into a life measured by gunpowder and distance. Outside, somewhere in the night, a single rifle shot echoed once more lean and certain. Nancy closed her eyes at the sound. For the first time in years, her quiet world no longer felt entirely predictable. Morning arrived with a restless wind, sweeping dust along Main Street. Nancy had been awake since dawn, though she could not have said why. Marcus's coat hung neatly behind the counter, the tear now nothing more than a memory stitched into strength. She was adjusting a hem when the bell above her door rang. Marcus stepped inside, hat in hand. "You work early," he observed. "So do you," she replied. He glanced around the shop, as if seeing it more clearly than before the neat rows of fabric, the sunlight pooling across polished wood, the small vase of dried wildflowers on the windowsill. "It's peaceful in here," he said quietly. Nancy lifted his coat from the hanger and handed it to him. "Peace is easier to manage than chaos." He slipped into the coat, rolling his shoulders once. The fit was perfect. "You're good at what you do," he said. "So are you." There was something unspoken in that exchange, mutual recognition of discipline, of long practice, of quiet sacrifices. Before he could respond, shouting erupted outside. Nancy stiffened. Marcus's expression shifted instantly. Relaxed posture gave way to alert calculation. They stepped to the doorway. A rider had entered town fast, his horse lathered and wild-eyed. The man dismounted sharply near the saloon. Nancy recognized him only from rumors whispered the night before. Cutter Briggs. He was broad-shouldered, scar slicing across his jaw, anger radiating from him like heat off sun-baked stone. "That's him," someone muttered. "Lost a fortune to hail up north." Cutter's gaze locked onto Marcus. "Phew," he barked. The street fell silent. Marcus stepped forward, calm as still water. "Morning." "You think you're clever," Cutter snarled. "Cheating men out of hard-earned money with fancy tricks." "No tricks," Marcus replied evenly. "Just aim." Cutter's hand hovered dangerously near his holster. Nancy felt her pulse hammer in her ears. "Don't," she whispered under her breath. Cutter drew first. The movement was sudden, but Marcus was faster. Two shots cracked through the air almost as one. Nancy gasped. When the dust settled, Cutter's revolver lay shattered in the dirt several feet away. The bullet had struck clean against the metal barrel, twisting it, useless. Marcus had not aimed at the man. He had aimed at the weapon. Cutter stared at his ruined gun in disbelief. "Next time," Marcus said quietly, "aim better." Humiliation burned across Cutter's face. He spat into the dirt and stormed back to his horse, riding out of town as quickly as he had entered. The silence lingered. Then murmurs began. "He could have killed him. Never misses. Deadliest shot I've ever seen." Nancy barely heard them. She moved toward Marcus, searching his face. "Are you hurt?" she asked. No, but she saw it. Then the tension beneath his composure. "The cost of always being ready. You didn't have to come outside," he said softly. "It's my town too," she replied. He studied her for a moment. "You're braver than you look." She gave a faint smile. "And you're gentler than you pretend." That caught him off guard. They walked slowly away from the dispersing crowd. "You could have killed him," she said, once they were alone. "I've killed before," Marcus answered honestly. "But not unless I had to. And today, I didn't have to." They reached the quiet stretch near her shop. Nancy turned to face him fully. "Is this what follows you from town to town? Men with wounded pride. Sometimes, and you're tired of it." It wasn't a question. He exhaled slowly. "I'm tired of living like every sunrise might be a challenge." The admission hung heavy between them. Nancy hesitated, then spoke carefully. "You don't have to live that way forever." Marcus looked at her as though the idea had never been presented before. "The road's all I've known," he said. "There are other paths," she replied. A long silence followed. "What would I do?" he asked quietly. "Without this." She glanced toward the abandoned barn just beyond town. "Teach," she suggested. Train others. Make it something steadier. He considered the thought deeply. And you, he asked. Would you stay here forever? Nancy looked down at her hands. I used to think I had to, she said. But maybe staying doesn't mean standing still. Their eyes met. Something shifted. Then not dramatic like gunfire, but subtle and certain, like thread pulled snug. Marcus removed his gloves slowly. If I stayed, he began, it wouldn't be just for a barn or a job. Nancy's breath caught. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. A breeze lifted the edge of her skirt, carrying with it the scent of dust and possibility. For the first time, the future did not feel like a single narrow seam. It felt like fabric wide and waiting, and neither of them stepped away. The days after Cutter Briggs rode out of Red Hollow felt different, not quieter. There were still cattle to drive, arguments to settle, and cards to lose. At the saloon, but steadier, as if something sharp had been sanded down. Marcus did not leave. That fact alone became the town's favorite topic. Nancy pretended not to notice the sideways glances and knowing smiles when Marcus began spending his mornings repairing the abandoned barn at the edge of town. The roof had sagged in the middle, and one side leaned like a tired shoulder. But under his hands, it began to take shape again. She watched from her shop window as he worked, sleeves rolled up, movements deliberate, hammer striking and measured rhythm. A sharpshooter, rebuilding instead of destroying. It stirred something warm inside her. One afternoon, Marcus stepped into her shop, carrying a small bundle wrapped in cloth. For you, he said, placing it gently on her counter. Nancy unfolded the cloth to reveal fine navy fabric, smoother than anything she'd stocked in months. From the rail station, 2 towns over, he explained. Thought you might like it. She ran her fingers across it, appreciating the quality. It's beautiful. You see beauty in small things, he said quietly. Figured I should start noticing them too. Her cheeks warmed, but she held his gaze. And are you? I'm trying. Outside town, the barn slowly transformed. Marcus set up posts at measured distances. He hammered together sturdy targets. Word spread that he was offering lessons, not gambling tricks, not exhibitions for drunken wagers, but instruction. Boys came first, wide-eyed and eager. Then a few ranch hands, curious about sharpening their aim. Marcus taught them patience before trigger, breath before bullet, control. Nancy overheard him say one afternoon when she walked past, you don't fire until you know why you're firing. It was a different kind of precision. One evening, as the sun melted gold across the prairie, Nancy walked out to the barn carrying a basket. Marcus was adjusting a target when he noticed her. Brought supper, she said. They sat side by side on a low fence rail, sharing bread and salted meat. The barn smelled of fresh-cut wood and hay. I never meant to stay anywhere, Marcus admitted after a while. Every town felt temporary. And now, she asked. He looked at the horizon. Now it feels like I'm building something. Instead of running toward the next shot, Nancy smiled softly. You're good at building too. He studied her profile in the fading light. You ever wish you'd chosen differently? Left this place? She thought carefully before answering. Sometimes, but I don't regret staying. She glanced toward him. Staying can be brave too. Marcus absorbed that. I used to think strength meant never hesitating, he said, never missing. And now, I think it might mean choosing what not to shoot at. She laughed softly. That's quite a revelation for a sharpshooter. He grinned. Don't spread it around. A comfortable silence settled between them. The barn creaked gently in the evening breeze. Fireflies blinked near the fence posts. Somewhere in town, a piano played faintly through an open saloon door. Nancy felt something settle in her chest, a steadiness she hadn't known she was missing. Marcus, she began carefully. If you stay, you'll still be who you are. I know, he replied. You don't have to lay down the rifle completely. I don't want to, he admitted. It's part of me, and that's all right. He looked at her. Then, something open and unguarded in his expression. You're not afraid of it? He asked. I'm not afraid of you, she answered honestly. The words carried weight. He slid off the fence rail and stepped closer. Close enough that she could see the faint scar along his collarbone. The mark of a life lived too near danger. I've spent years being the man people cheer for. From a distance, he said quietly, but you look at me like I'm just a man. You are, she said gently, a man who's tired of standing alone. The last light of day stretched long shadows across the barn floor. Marcus reached for her hand, slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wished. She didn't. His fingers were calloused, warm, steady. You stitch things together, he said softly. And you? She asked. I'm learning. He raised her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss across her knuckles. Not rushed, not reckless, intentional. Nancy's heart beat faster, but not with fear, with promise. Outside, the prairie darkened into indigo. The barn stood solid behind them, no longer abandoned, no longer broken, just like the two people standing beneath its roof. And for the first time, Marcus did not feel the restless urge to chase the horizon. For the first time, Nancy did not feel confined by the edges of her small town. Somewhere between needle and rifle, between stillness and aim, they had found balance, and it felt like the beginning of something neither of them wanted to outrun. Months had passed, and Red Hollow had begun to settle into a rhythm that included Marcus Hale not as a passing sharpshooter, but as part of the town itself. The once temporary figure at the edge of town had become a familiar presence. Hammer in hand, at the barn, rifle tucked carefully at his side, a calm smile for neighbors and children alike. Nancy's shop thrived, the hum of her sewing machines and the quiet scent of lavender filling every corner. She found herself smiling more often than she could remember, especially when Marcus stopped by not just to pick up mended coats or deliver fine bolts of fabric, but simply to linger and talk. One late afternoon, Nancy was folding a stack of dresses when Marcus stepped through the doorway, removing his hat with the ease of a man who had finally learned to be still. You've got the sun at your back, she said, with a playful smile, noticing the warm glow outlining his silhouette. I'll take it, he said, setting his hat on the counter. I've been meaning to ask, do you want to see something? Curious, Nancy followed him outside. He led her to the barn, now sturdy and polished under his care. Targets hung along the back wall, spaced evenly, a testament to months of patient work. He set a small box on the table near the entrance. What's this? She asked, brushing dust from the lid. Open it, he said softly. Inside were 3 small silver thimbles, polished to a mirror shine. Each one had a tiny engraving, a single thread stitched across the surface. For luck, he explained, his gray eyes meeting hers. Though I think I've already found it. Nancy laughed softly, touching the cool metal. I don't know if I deserve this. You do, he said firmly. You've taught me patience. You've shown me that not every fight needs a bullet to be won. You've changed the way I see things. Her heart swelled. Months ago, she would have been cautious around a man like Marcus I, forged by danger, tempered by distance. But she had watched him teach boys, mend fences, repair a barn, and even pause to notice the small, beautiful things in life. He had softened, not by abandoning who he was, but by choosing what mattered. They stood in the late afternoon sun, the prairie stretching wide behind them. Marcus took her hand, steady as always, and lifted it to his lips. Nancy could feel the faint weight of a life once lived on the edge, now carefully tethered to hers. I don't need the road anymore, he said, almost a whisper. I've got what matters right here. And I've got you, she replied, her voice barely above the wind that rustled the tall grass. For a long moment, they stood together, letting the quiet of the prairie wrap around them. No exhibition, no audience, no danger, just a people who had found a rhythm together, stitched from patience, courage, and trust. Later, as twilight painted the sky in shades of deep purple and gold, they returned to the shop, their hands intertwined. The shop and the barn, the sewing and the aim, had become parts of a single, carefully stitched life. Life they could build together. One day, one stitch, one steady shot at a time. Nancy looked up at Marcus and smiled, the warmth of the moment filling her chest. I think we're ready, she said softly. Marcus nodded, brushing a stray strand of hair from her face. For whatever comes next. And as the prairie shadows lengthened, The quiet seamstress and the sharpshooter stood side by side, stitched and steady, ready to face whatever the West would bring. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more Western stories.